And we are live. This is our very first 40 Under 40 Public Health Catalyst Award interviews today. I'm Dr. Candace Carpenter. I'm co-chief executive officer of the Boston Congress of Public Health, as well as the co-editor in chief of HPHR Journal, formerly known as Harvard Public Health Review. I have a wonderful guest with us today, Dr. Ithar Hassaballa. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, Ithar Hassaballa.
Okay. And as a brief introduction, Dr. Hassaballa is the evaluation project manager for COPE. She's also at the University of Kansas Medical Center. She is co-founder and chief brilliance officer of Hassaballa Consulting, and she is also a fellow for the WHO Collaborating Center for Community Health and Development at the University of Kansas. So welcome, Dr. Hassaballa. So I wanted to just start this with having you tell us more about your background, because I obviously can't do it justice, but tell the audience more about yourself, what you're doing, what part of the world you're zooming in from.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Carpenter. Um, uh, right now, I am in Kansas City. I'm in the Kansas City area. I work at the University of Kansas Medical Center, and my role is to evaluate a large $13 million project related to supporting 20 counties across Kansas in terms of building the infrastructure for public health, especially after COVID-19. So really addressing community needs. Um, based on what communities believe are their most important issues. And so some counties decided that they really, really want to focus on transportation, others childcare, others, job opportunities. So it's really an array of different issues that we're trying to address within the community, really utilizing community health workers and people from the community. And so, really utilizing their expertise and brilliance in addressing their own needs. And so, we help support that. I am working to support analysis, data analysis, and also addressing issues related to medication adherence for children who are HIV positive in Kenya. And so we are trying to reduce all of the challenges that parents have to go through to administer HIV medications to their children, from carrying very bulky medications all the way to bitter taste. And so we're working with a pharmaceutical company and as well as engineers to design um, basically strips that are dissolvable instead of the big medications. And so these are these are some of the projects I'm working on currently. I am a global citizen, is what how I describe myself. I am of the community, and there are so many places that I go where I just feel at home, and that's the type of person I am. So I was born in Sudan, in the White Nile province, a place called Jazira Abba, and moved to the U.S. When I was a child, and my parents really wanted to provide my siblings and I have an older brother and a younger sister, of like all the opportunities that would have been really difficult to attain in Sudan, based on the political climate and so many various barriers. And so moved to the US, and I, didn't speak English. And so that was a challenge, but it was also an opportunity to really get to, practice diversity and also connect with diverse members of the community. I have friends from all over the place because I value learning about other people, and I also value the importance of treating people well, no matter where they're from or based on those their identities. And so um, it's a fabulous experience. I've also supported the World Health Organization Collaborating Center at the University of Kansas to really engage with our World Health Organization partners in Africa. And that has also led to many various opportunities to train people, provide technical assistance on evaluation, and I got to travel to many African countries. And so I am just really excited to get to, be a part of the 40 under 40, because I also feel that I am now connected to, that many different colleagues from all over the globe that are really passionate about the work that they do, but each person is a piece of the puzzle to really start building the infrastructure for public health and to really think about how we can help support communities in addressing community problems and goals.
Now that I think your story is absolutely amazing. And if I could dig a little deeper, so you said you started off in Sudan and now you're at, University of Kansas. How did, what prompted you to get into public health and want to make a difference in that area? Was there something in your life, like a singular transformational event, or more, was it more a concatenation of multiple things that may have happened in life?
That's an excellent question, and I often reflect on it. So I just knew that from a very early age, that I really cared about health. And I actually found a notebook from sixth grade, and it had all of these like misspellings because I was learning English at the time. But basically, I described public health when the teacher asked us, "Hey, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, I want to, make sure that there's no more AIDS. I want to make sure that there's no more cancer, and I want everyone to live a happy, healthy life. And so I didn't know that was like public health or it had something to do with public health. And so early on, I just knew that I really loved the globe and global people and diversity. And I also loved health. And so I started off thinking that maybe I was going to do pharmacy or somewhere in the health spectrum. And then I found, I was talking to one of my mentors, and he was the African librarian, and I was his assistant. And so we would have discussions about Africa and health. And so he said, "Hey, Ethar, have you considered public health?" And I said, "What's that?" Right? I was an undergrad. And he said, "Look into this because everything you're describing to me sounds like public health." And so I started to look it up and I found that we actually have a community health background or a community health degree, but not public health degree. So I went and kind of got the community health degree with an emphasis on African and African American studies because that's really a passion of mine. And I also took up Swahili because I really wanted to learn another African language. And so all of those experiences led me to study Swahili abroad. And then, you know, I was at a lunch. I was invited to a lunch, and I was invited to speak for 1 minute about kind of my plans for going to Africa and my interest in health and development. And so, at that multicultural lunch speech, right after Dr. Fawcett, who's now one of my mentors, walked up to me and said, "Hey, Ethar, since you are going to Africa and you're really interested in health, how about this last year of your undergrad, you intern with us at the World Health Organization Collaborating Center? Take some behavioral science courses and see how you enjoy that." And I said, "It's funny that you are telling me about this because I received 3 emails from 3 different people that I should apply to this, but I just didn't think that I had time." And he said, "Oh no, you do have time. Please apply. We're going to extend, you know, the time for so that you can apply." So once I did, and then my last year, I was able to collaborate on addressing, needs related to training and capacity building of the public health workforce, and especially decided to work on the community toolbox, which is really the largest community building resource online that's free. And so after working on that for 1 year, I learned so much about behavioral science and how, you know, a lot of just our environment impacts our behavior and our health in a different way. In health education, it's really about the education piece. And in behavioral science, it's about the education piece. It's also about the supports that are available within your community. It's about your built environment. It is about the opportunities offered to you. And so all of that, I just that really resonated with me because sometimes, with health, health and well-being, you know, we think about the environment, but not in this holistic way, right? Like a lot of times in public health, we say, okay, everybody get up and let's exercise. Well, if it's unsafe to run outside, and or if it's too hot, like there are just so many barriers that people experience in everyday life, that and we in public health think about them often. And so it's really important to start also communicating with community members to really identify some of those barriers, because sometimes, because we are not experiencing those barriers ourselves, we might not see them. And so I was able to do this for 1 year. And then after that, I applied to many different public health programs and decided that I will stay with Dr. Fawcett to complete my degree in behavioral psychology with an emphasis on community health and development, and also get my master's of public health from the University of Kansas Medical Center. And this is the campus that I'm sitting in right now, where I received my MPH. After that, I went to Egypt for 2 years to teach, and that was another amazing global experience. But I have always thought about health, especially among Black people, African Africans, and also African Americans, and really the diaspora. So this is just I learned from that experience, going to that lunch and finding my one of my mentors and really close friends, is that if you show up in spaces where you are able to share kind of your goals and also your vision and mission, there are people in that room who might, you know, either support you, cheer you on, or even find an opportunity that you haven't really thought about.
Absolutely. And the thing that I find really fascinating about your story, right, is just that international perspective. One thing I wanted to dig a little bit deeper on. So you said you taught in Egypt. So my question to you is, having taught in Egypt, having all the different experiences from where you're from in Sudan, and having been to other African countries, other places you may have traveled, is what are some of the top public health issues from places that you've gone compared to the U.S.? So what are those top ones? And then where are those public health issues that seem to be the same from country to country? And then what are those which ones are different?
Yes, absolutely. So, I think by and large, there are infrastructure barriers in Africa, like, for example, clean water, uh, you know, and sanitation, and so those are some barriers that I see across in Africa. Now, not everywhere in Africa has issues with water and sanitation, but especially those rural areas that I've been to really lack the infrastructure related to clean water, sanitation, sometimes even energy, and assuring that people have electricity. And so I've met students that can only study using sunlight, and so as soon as the sun sets, that's it for in terms of doing homework or just getting work done related to school. And so I think about that, and then I think about my childhood and, some of the things that I didn't really have to think about, both in Sudan. In Sudan as a child, I didn't really have to think too much about lights going out. It did happen, but right, there are places right now that just where students are just don't have that resource, and sometimes I think we take that for granted here in the U.S. There are cross-cutting issues related to employment of young folks who have just graduated. I think we have that as well in terms of within the US. But a lot of graduates graduate with a degree and then don't really have the supports around them that they need to find the right job opportunity and really, start really earning, money, but also earning, respect and dignity to be able to bring in like a good livelihood. There are other issues too related to chronic conditions, diabetes, here across the US and abroad and in Africa. And I have seen that to be, you know, we are really experiencing a lot of the same challenges when it comes to chronic conditions like type 2 diabetes. I've done a lot of type 2 diabetes work in the US and abroad, and it seems to be a huge issue. Now, in Africa, too, there are issues related to uh, conditions that are more communicable conditions. We have HIV hotspots in Africa, as well as things related to cholera and again water and sanitation. So, but a lot of what I see is that we I've always said for how public health is done in Kansas can affect people in Kenya and vice versa. And so I think with COVID-19 and the COVID-19 response effort, we have just seen how global pandemics can occur, at a fast pace, and that it affects all of us in a lot of the same ways. And so, working on the infrastructure here in Kansas or in Kenya, we are making the world a healthier place by addressing a lot of these issues. So it's not distant to us. It's really issues that are near, and sometimes we don't really think about how close it is. But COVID-19 again reminded us that anything that happens here could really have an effect to on people abroad and vice versa.
Yeah, that is absolutely so true. And another thing that is related to your international work, I was reading about how you helped with the Ebola response in Liberia, and I feel like Ebola might not be something that is on everybody's radar, right? Because COVID-19 is. Could you talk a little bit about that response and kind of any key takeaways, from that? Any um, related ideas that you got from that, from working with the Ebola response and then also working with the COVID-19 response?
Absolutely. So, as part of the World Health Organization Collaborating Center at the University of Kansas, we have friends, abroad in Africa who we've been connecting on different projects. And so, when the Ebola response happened, um, we had already had an evaluation system built and ready to go. So we had to just, uh, you know, refine what we're measuring, what's really happening on the ground. And so we had an evaluation consultant that was based in Liberia. And so his goal was to really let us know who was on the ground and how were they helping with the Ebola response effort. And so it was a lot of the international organizations and local organizations, government, the Minister of Health, really implementing communication strategies and implementing meetings to try and identify, where the hot spots are and how to communicate to the locals and how to engage leaders in addressing, you know, uh, the needs of the community, but then also how do people protect what are those protective behaviors. And so we worked with the Applied Behavioral Science department at KU, of which I'm a graduate, to really begin to help people understand what are some of those protective behaviors so that they don't get infected. Uh, and from all of that, we learned that, well, first of all, the technology is so important. Being able to use the community checkbox evaluation system to be able to collect and document what was really happening on the ground. That was one thing, but then also to be able to understand all of the gaps. So sometimes the gaps were related to community members really wanting to get together, go to funerals and weddings and like all of the community events that are happening, but then also assuring that community members are on board, religious leaders and traditional leaders as well. Everybody had to um, you know come together to have an effective message that will work for in terms of like addressing Ebola. One thing we also found out was that it had to do with sanitation, the infrastructure, like just having clean water, being able to have someone to transport people to the hospital, um, and can also stay safe doing that. There were just so many things, and I was having so many almost flashbacks when the COVID-19 response was happening at the same time, because again, people needed to understand what was happening, but also what are those protective behaviors, and then also try to work on the infrastructure and assuring that all of the different sectors are talking and are on the same page about what was happening in the community and who was going to work on which piece to try and effectively manage an infectious disease.
Hmm. And transitioning just a little bit. So I know that you have your own consulting firm, which I took a peek at, Hasselbala Consulting. Tell us a little bit about that consulting firm and who it's for.
Yes, absolutely. So to address many needs in the community, my sister is my colleague here at work. She's the regional community lead for the West region, 5 counties in Kansas, um, for the Northeast region. So one gap that we continue to see within public health, um, and within communities, is the ability for people to, especially, you know, Black women, um, Black men, but especially Black women, and Muslim women as well, to be able to find a job opportunity in which they feel alive. They feel alive about doing the work. They have energy after work because everything is, they get up with so much energy. um, there is a gap in terms of economics, and people are looking for the right job opportunities and sometimes don't know where to begin. And so the consulting firm really helps women, and especially Black women, package their brilliance in the form of resumes, CVs, cover letters. This is a huge gap. I've always been interested in how people share what they've done, but also kind of summarize their contributions in society. And so this is just to address people finding the right job opportunity. We also go a little bit further to support leaders, executive leaders, in creating a healthy, happy workplace environment. And so sometimes just because it's the right job opportunity and you love your projects, it doesn't mean that everything is great at work, especially in terms of collaboration between team members and really addressing, you know, um, things related to diversity, equity, inclusion, and assuring that voices are heard. And so, really supporting executive leaders think about how to create a happy, healthy workplace environment from a behavioral standpoint in terms of what is it about the built environment? How could you work on the built environment to assure that it's inviting for people? How could you work with various team members to assure that you are being equitable? What about giving feedback? Like, how do you give feedback that is timely and effective and kind? Because I think the most important part is, being being a good person, but then also assuring that the other party receives the support that they need to do their job well. And then also as a leader, how to take feedback, from others as well. So it's really a lot. We work on a lot of different things, but we think that one public health issue is our CVs, resumes, and cover letters. Of course, there are when it comes to finding the right job opportunities, there are so many public health issues, and also, um, structural issues that you know help others, but also are actually disadvantageous for other people as well. So really trying to support, um, you know, uh, folks with different various backgrounds find that right job opportunities, because we need a lot more diversity around the table to be able to make decisions and really address public health needs.
Absolutely. Could not agree with you more. Diversity inclusion, which resonates very strongly with, our organization, the Boston Congress of Public Health. And so, Dr. Hasselballa, tell us a little bit about what have been some of the most inspiring moments in your life and career.
Wow. I have so many inspiring moments in my life and my career. First, I'm just inspired by people around me, and so family members, and friends. One thing that's inspiring to me is in my life is my father. He actually came to the U.S. back in the 1980s um, on scholarship for his master's and PhD. And it's so inspiring because the things related to water, sanitation, not having power, that those are the things that my dad dealt with. And he was able to go from rural white Nile province to Seattle, Washington, get his degrees and then go back, right? And so he didn't really think he was going to come back, but after having us, later thought that it would be amazing to come back. And so he uh he paints, and he just does, he just wanted us to have all of the opportunities afforded to us, and so he inspires me. um the other thing too is my mom was with us, my siblings and I, in Sudan, and she's a teacher, and so she took care of us while dad was also trying to, help us get to the US. And so she also embodies, the person, that is very hardworking and, a working mother, until we were all reunited with my dad. There are just moments that inspired me. For example, when we started publishing on the Ebola response effort with the Africa team, um, I took a moment and I was so inspired because a lot of the Ebola publications were not coming out of Africa at the time. A lot of those research studies, and so it took me a moment, but of what all of this meant. But for us to collaborate with the Africa team and have their leadership as part of that writing process, review process, and then submission and acceptance from the continent, from Africa, that really told me that it's really really important to hear uh, the stories of people, but it's more important that they tell their stories themselves. And so I'm just happy that that was really very inspiring to me. Um, and the additional inspiration is when my daughter, my 3-year-old daughter, says, "Mommy, you're my hero," because she knows that I am helping communities now. I didn't go into too much detail as far as explaining what mommy does, but to say, "Hey, you are my hero, and you're making a difference in the community," that just means so much to me.
I think that's absolutely wonderful. That even your young daughter can see that, and that's what we're hoping. That young people can see the work that you do, that you are doing, Dr. Hasabala, and other winners of the 40 Under 40 Public Health Catalyst Awards. So conversely, you've had these inspiring moments, but conversely, what are some of the challenging moments you've had in your life and career, and what are the things that they've taught you?
Yes, absolutely. One of the earliest challenges I had was, um, just not being around extended family. Like, extended family have always been there. And so just moving to the US at age 10, I think a lot of us here in America don't really think about, uh, some of those challenges if we haven't experienced them. And so, but then I channel those challenges in different ways. So how can I, visit often enough and help support, organizations, maybe translate documents, or, you know, um, support in the health and public health infrastructure where, when I can, from being far away. But then also just realizing that any good that I do here or abroad, that hopefully, it benefits the communities, both directly and indirectly. um, Another challenge, I would say that I've experienced is, related to, um, wanting to take on a lot of different things all at once. And those are challenges, but then they're also opportunities. So, I am one to always want to help where I can. And so I am talking to different people in different places, and they're wanting to do different projects and things. And so, that's been a challenge, but it has been such a unique challenge. And I am, excited to be a part of the 40 Under 40 and see what other projects come about, in collaboration with others. And so I think it's always good to, when we're so busy, to step back and say, okay, how can I, organize my life so that I can get rest, and not just rest, but like deep rest, so that I'm not working. But at the same time, what I do is, um, so close to me that a lot of the times I don't feel like I'm working. And so I'm just trying to balance, all of that. And so I just want, everyone, that's hearing, to really think about taking a rest, and making sure that they get deep rest. And for different people, it means different things. But that once you rest, for some people, it might be going on vacations. For others, a staycation. Whatever it is to you, just when you realize what deep rest is, and identify it, then you can schedule it so that you make sure that you are healthy and happy, so that you can, contribute to society in the ways in which you would like to.
I think that's so incredibly important. And I hope the audience takes heed of that, the need of finding deep rest for yourself. And as you said, Dr. Hasselwell, that can be very different for each kind of person. So one of the things that the Boston Congress of Public Health is doing in September is we're going to do host the Run for Justice. So we'll be having 5Ks, 10Ks, as well as half marathons and marathons. And there'll be a number of causes that will have LGBTQ plus health, reproductive rights, racial justice, gun violence, as well as supporting new health leaders such as Dr. Hasaballa. Dr. Hasaballa, what are some of the top issues today that resonate with you the most, that you're the most passionate about, things that have happened most recently in current events, either domestically or abroad?
There are just so many issues I often think about. And I think social justice is, all encompassing. And there are so many things that we all need to be thinking about, and really raising up some of those passions, I think. One thing I did see in the news, most recently was that there was a, gun violence in Soweto, South Africa. And, you know, gun violence in the US, especially, in recent months, has really been a huge top of mind issue for me. With the Ivaldi shooting, I had a hard time dropping Jude off at school because I was just, I had like this gut feeling. And, so I think, you know, being able to explain how guns are, they are a public health issue for us. And so thinking about not only how do we address this in the US, but other countries too are now having, more and more of the same issues. And so that is like huge top of mind, more recently, but especially with all of, you know, the unexpected, running, or you could get shot running, sleeping at home, going to the mall, going to the movies. Like there's just no way to um move away from that. I've actually adjusted my schedule so that I don't do my shopping on weekends. Um, just things like that, to avoid like larger crowds and things like that. And I think that everyone deserves to feel safe. Another thing that is huge for me is racial justice. It is so important to be thinking about Black and brown people, in America and abroad, and how to create conditions so that they can thrive and, thrive in the workplace, health and well-being. Uh, it largely for me comes to, addressing economic gaps, career-related gaps, education and health gaps. And so, those are some of the things that I, continue to think about. The gun issue kind of was raised up more recently, but since I was a child, I have been thinking about race. In Sudan, people are Black largely, although, people are diverse and there are many shades of Black. Um, but there are, at age 10 is when I realized that I'm Black. Coming to America is when I realized I'm Black, only because, you know, a girl in my sister's class at the time said, I don't like Rua because she's Black. And that was the first time, like, we had the talk with my dad about being Black in America. And so, that's since age 10, I've really been hyper aware that, first of all, I'm Black and I'm a woman, right? And then, growing up, like, I'm Muslim too, right? And so there are just a lot of different things that I think about related to race, but I just want to make sure that we all think about, no matter where we're from, who we are, our identities, to think about how do you create conditions for this person, maybe in your office, maybe at the grocery store, maybe you meet them somewhere in a meeting. How could you create conditions for that person to be successful, right? And so supporting them, giving them the seat, giving them an opportunity, asking them, what are some of those challenges and barriers that you can help remove. These are just important, human aspects that we all need to be thinking about and acting upon as well.
Once again, another well-made point, and I couldn't agree more. Right, everything you're talking about is, establishing equity, right? That regardless of who that person is, that it's not just a matter of, equalizing the playing field, because people have different things that they're bringing to the table, right? Be it their racial background, their religious background, et cetera, and how can we make circumstances equitable for them? And then, so important too, as leaders, what can we do to make places hospitable in any given region. And I will say, Dr. Hassaballa, I had a similar experience growing up as well. The first time I had to talk about being Black as well is that, yes, it came from another younger colleague, making a comment about me being Black, and then, yes, had that moment where I sat down with my mother and we discussed what that meant. So very, very powerful, and glad that we share that. I wanted to switch gears again and talk more about public health. And, with all of your experience that you've done, all of your traveling, all of your teaching, what is missing in your mind from the public health curriculum, either from, where you've, seen it being taught, or, maybe even from the public health discourse?
Yes, absolutely. I think, one thing that is missing is really the deep experience of diverse populations. And by what I mean is that perhaps, since I've done my master's of public health, things have shifted. There is, I would say, clearly a social justice approach to public health that I think is unique. It's what makes the public health field, I think, so intriguing for so many people. Um, what I love about the 40 under 40 is the diversity that each of us brings to the table. And so, when you're reviewing public health curricula, it's largely, um, centered around interventions, in America, perhaps Europe, Australia. But how could we assure that our curriculum includes, more interventions and unique approaches from the African continent, right? I do remember some studies from Southeast Asia, but it would be really really unique to get to document some of those in our curriculum, and this could happen when there are diverse people around the table who have been to these places or who have done work in these places to really try to bring a more holistic uh, curriculum and also new ways of solving problems. I remember doing work in Kenya back in 2012 with the World Health Organization there at the Kenya office, and we were visiting community health workers that had very unique ways in addressing, community problems. So, for example, um, uh, and I'm sorry to be using this example, but I think it's a good one. Um, Female genital cutting is was a really huge problem at the time, and so they used you know th- this cultural approach is used kind of as a rite of passage for girls to move into womanhood. And so one of the approaches that they used was related to community education, but then also supporting the community to sit down with the elders and really think about ways in order to have a rites of passage without the actual procedure that is damaging both physically and mentally and as well as emotionally. And so they worked out a way where the elders would host kind of a week long, I would call it a retreat because that's exactly what it was, of teaching these young women about womanhood and kind of graduating them to have that rite of passage without the dangerous procedure. And so it took a lot of effort to make that happen. But again, we have healthier, more empowered women, young women, because they used a community based approach that worked for them in that context. And so I would have loved to see something like that in our curriculum.
All right. And so I would just like to say, Dr. Hasabala, thank you so much for this interview. And just as a signing off, last question. This is our inaugural 40 Under 40 Public Health Catalyst Awards, and you being one of the winners. what would you like to see with your cohort, going forward? Any opportunities that you think can be leveraged? And then also, what would you like to see in the evolution of this award?
This is amazing. So I would love to connect with um, 40 under 40, awardees who are currently doing global health, both communicable disease, but also non-communicable disease, and really think about ways in which I can learn from maybe different areas that haven't really worked in, and seeing how that information can be useful, or I can translate that into other things, other projects. I'm also thinking about what I want to do long term, and so uh you know having uh team members who are in different spaces, just trying to understand uh, their challenges, and the various opportunities they've been a part of, because this grant does have an end date, and so I just want to be able to be thinking about what next. And I know that global health is really close to my heart, and so I just hope that I can impact, learn together, and contribute together, and with 40 under 40 members. Now, as far as like the future of the 40 under 40, I would say that just based on what I've seen from communications, from the Boston Congress of Public Health, to the awardees, and all of the communications that have come out, I am more than confident that you know we in public health are heading in a direction that is you know inclusive, and that really pays attention to you know diversity, and really um, supports uh, the young generation to really address those global health and public health issues. And so my wish for the Boston Congress of Public Health is that they just continue to do this work, and continue to advocate um, for public health in America and abroad.
That's wonderful. So thank you so much for spending, close to a good hour with me, Dr. Hasselballa. For everybody listening, thank you. If you want to learn more about the 40 under 40, Dr. Hasselballa, please go to bcph.org/40 under 40. And Dr. Hasselballa has more information, ways you can connect with her, what she's doing in Kansas, the WHO, as well as with her Hasselballa consulting firm. And you can also learn about HPHR Journal, where we discuss all things public health at hphr.org. And you can also publish with us there as well. So thank you again. And this is us signing off.